upping the stakes here. It's not only Higgs bundles, but now it's infinite dimensions. So it's the key component for SL infinity R.
Well, thank you. We thank the organizers for the invitation. It's actually it's my first GEAR meeting, but it's a wonderful conference. So yeah, I want to talk on etching component for SL infinity. So yeah, so let me remind you quickly. If we take a compact Riemann surface, hyperbolic, etching defined what we call now the etching component for representations into SL and R. So you just take a function representation into SL to R, and then you take the irreducible embedding into SL and R, and you take all the deformations of these representations. And etching proves that well, this is diffeomorphic to some vector space, actually, a space of holomorphic differentials. So from quadratic differentials up to n's or differentials of degree n. Okay, and then all this story developed a lot, and lots of people work on these questions. And recently, Etchin proposed something, some similar component for the group SL infinity. So which should be some kind of limit for SLN when n goes to infinity. And so it's not based on some strange infinite dimensional algebra of the group SL infinite. It's based on the geometric interpretation of the group not SL infinite, but SU infinite as a group of Hamiltonian diffeomorphisms of the two spheres. And which means that, well, you can, with this interpretation, you can do geometry. Because it means that you can look at symplectic S2 bundles over a surface, and the objects for these groups will mean something on these bundles. That will be concrete geometric objects. So, what do I want to do in this talk? Etching parametrization is via the non-abelian Hodge theorem we have just seen in the previous talk. So you parameterize the moduli space of representations by a moduli space of X bundles. So my perspective will be the same as I will look at the Dolbeault space, the space of X bundles. So we'll see that a point in the Dolbeault space for SL infinity actually corresponds to some hyperkähler metric on the domain of the cotangent bundle of the surface. So be careful, it's not the same hyperkähler metrics we have seen in the previous talk. It's not hyperkähler metric on the moduli space. It's each point of the moduli space which corresponds to some hyperkähler metric. There is a Hitchin map. So there is a collection of holomorphic differentials which come with this picture. Namely, so if I take such hyperkähler domain in the cotangent space of a surface, so I have a Kähler form omega 1. I have the canonical Liouville form WDZ, and I can integrate the nth power of the Liouville form along the fibers. It turns out, so you integrate along the fibers with the Kähler form, and it turns out that the result is holomorphic. So this gives a holomorphic differential of degree n. So to each domain, we will associate a collection of holomorphic differentials of all degrees. And this will identify locally the Hitchin component to the space of all holomorphic differentials, which what we expect, since we want this SL infinite Hitchin component to be the limit of the SLN Hitchin component in some sense. And finally, I will explain some approximation procedure of the points for SL infinity by points for SLN when n goes to infinity. Okay, so let's begin with the first part. What? Yeah.
In your notation, to get omega 1 is I'm1 the complex structure for which the domain is just sits inside of the cotangent for the obvious complex structure?
Yeah, it's the standard complex structure of the cotangent is I1 of this hypercolour metric. Yeah. And the symplectic, the holomorphic symplectic form is also the standard holomorphic symplectic form. Okay, so let's try to understand this SL infinity R X bundle theory. So let me first come back to SLN. So how do we parameterize the SLNR Hitchin component? So one needs a Cartan decomposition of the Lie algebra SLN. So the compact part, so that's the orthogonal Lie algebra, and the non-compact part, the symmetric trace-free matrices. And these decompositions tells you which X bundles you must consider. So the X bundle, that's a holomorphic vector bundle, plus some X field. So the fact that the compact group is SON tells you that the holomorphic bundle must be a SONC holomorphic bundle. And the fact that the non-compact part is a space of trace-free symmetric matrices tells you that the X field is not any endomorphism of V, but it must be a symmetric trace-free endomorphism of V. Of course, it's a one form with values in the symmetric endomorphisms. And then there is this explicit description of the Hitchin component that you take this bundle, so the sum of powers of the canonical bundle. This has a canonical orthogonal structure because you can pair two opposite bundles here in this sum. So each bundle here is isotropic. And you can write down an explicit X field in this way, which is symmetric with respect to this orthogonal structure. And so I guess probably most people are familiar with this. You had a mini course on X bundle theory last week, I think. So, well, you can write down exactly all the symmetric endomorphisms of this bundle, and they turn out to be written exactly in this way. So the one, for example, the one here, what is it? It goes from k power n minus 1 over 2 to k power n minus 3 over 2, but you must twist by k. So you want something which goes from k power n minus 1 over 2 to this one tensor by k that is to itself. So there is something canonical which is 1 here. And in the same way, you can analyze all coefficients, and it turns out that you get the QIs, which are holomorphic differentials of degree I. And this gives all such X bundles. So this describes the whole component, which is therefore defined, which is parameterized by these coefficients QI. Okay, so let's go to SL infinity. So I don't really need to describe SL infinity. What I really need is something analogous to SON and to symmetric trace-free matrices. So I need the group SO infinity. So there is some classical interpretation for this inside SU infinity. So first, there is an interpretation of SU infinity as a group of Hamiltonian diffeomorphisms of the two-sphere. So I will, later in the talk, I will explain in some precise sense, you can see the group SUN which converge to SU infinity. But just now, the first evidence for this statement is that you can decompose the Lie algebra under the action of SU2 into irreducible components. And so SU infinity is just Hamiltonian function on S2, so that's all functions on S2 except the constant. So you decompose under the action of S2, and you get a three-dimensional piece, five-dimensional, etc. That's classical spherical decomposition. And for SUN, you get irreducible components from 3, 5 to 2n minus 1 dimensional components. So somehow you can think of SUN when n goes to infinity, converge into this SU infinity. Well, that's the first evidence. Yeah.
The action of SU2 on the algebra of SUN is by the irreducible.
It's by yes. Yes. So the SU2 inside, precisely. So there is something important. The SUN is not Lie subalgebra of SU infinity. Okay. Oh, there is only SU2. Only SU2 is a Lie subalgebra of SU infinity. So SU2 inside SU infinity here described as the Hamiltonian functions given by the coordinates. Okay, the sphere is just given by standard coordinates in R3. So the three coordinates on R3 give you a copy of SU2 inside SU infinite. So with the standard Poisson brackets. So now there is a Cartan decomposition, which is quite natural. You consider the symmetry with respect to the equatorial plane. So x0 goes to minus x0, and you look at anti-invariant functions. So this is Poisson subalgebra, and you take the invariant functions, the sum here, k plus p gives you a symmetric decomposition of SU infinity. If you think of SU2 inside SO infinity, the SO corresponds to x0, that's the SO2, it's one-dimensional, and the x1 and x2 are invariant, so they are in the p part. Okay, so we have SU infinity. Well, somehow I am using here some trick. You know, for SLN, I wrote SLN as SON plus, well, that's k plus p. And that's UN. SUN is a compact dual, so it's k plus IP. Okay, so describing the Cartan decomposition here or here, it's the same. So which means that when I describe the Cartan decomposition here for SU infinity, I have all I need to write down the equations. Okay, so let's do that. So just write locally. So we are on the Riemann surface at C, and with coordinates x plus y, iy. And so when you write down the Hitchin equation, there is a connection, there is a X field. So connection is just one form with value in the Lie algebra. So the Lie algebra here, what is it? It's a Hamiltonian function on the two-sphere, which means that each point of C, A0 and A1 is a function on S2. And there is a X field, which is one form, and again the coefficients A2 and A3 at each point of C is a function on S2. And I must preserve the Cartan decomposition that the A0, A1 must be in the K, so that's anti-invariant functions, and A2 and A3 are in the P, so that's invariant functions under this involution. And then, well, I write exactly Hitchin's equation, replacing the Lie algebra bracket by the Poisson bracket. So the first equation is the equation on the curvature. So the three terms here are the curvature, and this is the X term, phi star, and this second equation says that the X field is holomorphic. Okay, so that's just formal. You can write down the equation in this way. But now, so I said each AI is at each point of C, it's a function of S2. So, of course, I can look at AI as a function on the total space C times S2. And it turns out that from this point of view, there is a very nice interpretation of these equations. So now I consider the AI as a function on C times S2. So I am in 4 dimensions. And so I consider, well, the vertical symplectic form, the one which I fixed on S2, minus dA0 wedge dx minus dA1 wedge dy. And I consider complex 2 form, which is d of A2 plus IA3 wedge dz. And it turns out that Hitchin's equation, which I just wrote, are equivalent to omega 1, omega 2, omega 3 being a hyperkähler triple, so defining a hyperkähler metric. This is, well, this is part of a somehow well-known theory. In gauge theory, there is a well-known formula of Ashtekar which says that if you have a certain system of volume preserving vector field in dimension 3, you produce a hyperkähler metric, and this is another occurrence of this fact. Okay, so having a hyperkähler triple means that the two forms are closed, they are orthogonal, and they define the same volume form. So the squares are equal. And so one can calculate easily the square here from the formula on omega c. If I calculate omega c, so this for example, omega 2 square, that's the same as 1/2 of omega c wedge omega c bar. And so I can write here from the formula I have here, it's d of A2 plus I A3, which d of A2 minus I A3. Okay, so that's up to some constant dA2, dA3, dz bar. And so I get here the Poisson bracket in vertical directions on the S2 times the symplectic form on S2. Okay, so that's important because, well, to actually have a hyperkähler metric, of course, the volume form must not degenerate. So when the Poisson bracket of these two functions, A2 and A3, vanishes, then the metric degenerates. So we have a metric on the locus where this Poisson bracket is non-zero. So again, this Poisson bracket, it's Poisson bracket only in the S2 direction. Okay, there is no bracket in the C direction. Okay, so that was in local coordinates, but it makes sense on a bundle. So geometrically, we have a Riemann surface, and we have a bundle, a symplectic bundle by S2s. And all I did make sense on this bundle. So I can define the solution of the SL infinity each in these equations in this setting, and I get an hyperkähler metric on the total space of the bundle, on M. So now this bracket A2, A3, which is also a vertical Poisson bracket, remember that this is A2, A3 are in the P part, the non-compact part, but the Poisson bracket in the compact part. So it's anti-invariant. But if it's anti-invariant, well, this involution on the two-sphere, it fixes the equatorial circle. So which means that this Poisson bracket has to vanish. It has to vanish on this circle bundle for the surface. So inside the M, I have the circle bundle X, and the hyperkähler metric has to degenerate on this circle bundle. So I will get an hyperkähler metric only on the two domains which are separated by this circle bundle. And one gets a certain kind of singularities on the circle bundle. That's what Hitchin called a folded hyperkähler metric. So very quickly, one gets a metric of this type. So if you take x equals 0 to be an equation of the circle bundle, so locally, the metric degenerates in this way. So there is a coframe on x, theta 1, theta 2, theta 3, and the metric degenerates in these two directions and blows up in this one. Okay, so we are not constructing smooth hyperkähler metrics. We are constructing hyperkähler metrics which degenerate in a certain way on the fold. And the metric turns out to be anti-invariant by the involution, which x gives minus x. So which means that, well, you have this circle bundle. So we are on the bundle, and here we have, on one side, we have a positive metric. Here it degenerates on the fold, but on the other side, you can see from the formula, it's negative. Okay, the metric is anti-invariant by the involution. But the metric is anti-invariant in the involution, so it's equivalent to just say that you have a metric on this side. So you can just say equivalently that you have a hyperkähler metric on a domain with boundary with a certain type of behavior at the boundary. Okay, so what are the examples? So, well, if you take SL2R X bundle, so one of the points in this, well, corresponds to hyperbolic metrics, because there is this morphism from SL2 to SL infinity, SL2R bundle leads to SL infinity R bundle. So it gives a solution like that. So one gets hyperbolic metric. So if I take the standard solution, the one for which the quadratic differential is 0, then I get some hyperkähler metric on the disk bundle of the cotangent bundles. That's a well-known metric which is incomplete on the cotangent bundle of a hyperbolic Riemann surface. And it's S1 invariant. So it's explicit. One can write down the formulas. If I take another hyperbolic metric, so in each moduli space that's parametrized by a non-zero quadratic differential, then one gets other hyperkähler metrics which are deformations of these examples, which are already non-trivial. So, well, that's the first example. They come just from SL2R theory. So that's the Dolbeault perspective, the parametrization by X bundle. So you can ask in this setting, can we see the other side of the correspondence as the representation? So here's the hyperbolic matrix. And it turns out, yeah.
So before you have these M4, so the M4 is just compactification of your sigma.
Not exactly. No, there is not exactly. It's a question of folding. Because actually the metric, as I express here, the metric is on the domain of the cotangent bundle, but it's folded, so that means that on the other side well, I can write you formula. No. If you write down omega 2 and omega 3, and the yeah. Okay, so that's so the holomorphic symplectic form is this one. Okay, so you see these forms they degenerate on the fold. There is on the fold x equals 0. There is something non-zero, but they degenerate. But the only degenerate is just a coordinate degeneration, because this is d of x squared over 2. Okay, if you change the coordinate, omega c becomes symplectic form up to the boundary, which turns out to be the symplectic form of the cotangent bundle on some domain of the cotangent bundle. But that's changing the coordinate of the boundary. It's doing x gives x squared, which is exactly folding. You see, so from the domain of the cotangent bundle, you somehow you fold, and that's how you get the symplectic bundle. So it's not exactly a compactification of the cotangent bundle. Okay, so this is the X picture. Where are the representations? So the hyperbolic metric. Turns out here there is a nice picture. You can recover it from the omega 2. So the omega 2, if you restrict omega 2 to the fold, to the three-dimensional manifold, so it's a two-form, a closed two-form. So it has a kernel, and this kernel is the geodesic flow of the corresponding hyperbolic metric. So somehow we recover the hyperbolic metrics in this picture by their geodesic flows on the fold. Okay, so what is the Mitchin component now? So I want a domain which is a folded hyperkähler metric, but I want more because in these equations, omega c, which I define, is d of this one form. But this a two form of this form must be the symplectic form of a cotangent bundle, where the A2 plus I A3 is the Liouville form. So there is an additional condition. You don't want only a folded hyperkähler metric, you want it to be on a cotangent space. So the first thing I proved when I tried to elaborate on Hitchin's ideas is that indeed this defines a nice Hitchin component. So you start from this model metric, and at least you can try to understand small deformations. And indeed, near the standard model, the Hitchin component, so the space of all these metrics, is parametrized by holomorphic differentials of all degrees. So the statement is slightly more elaborate because you have to put some topology on this space, maybe, but it's not important. Yeah.
So here, it's some kind of degeneracy, the way it behaves near the boundary of the disk?
Yeah, it's two equivalent point of view. Because because of the invariance under the involution. So if you have one side, you have the other side by applying the involution. So you can reconstruct it. So it's the same to parameterize just by the hyperkähler metric on one side of the fold.
By the right side means you have a certain very specific type of behavior on the boundary.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I called folded. Okay, so we have this. So the proof. Well, the proof relies on a hyperkähler formalism. How do you deform a hyperkähler metric? Maybe I will not enter into the details. There is some analysis for the metric with this kind of degeneracy to understand. Yeah, maybe at the end, but I'm not sure I've written again the formula, but I can write it on the board. Well, let me not give more details on the proof. There is quite a lot of analysis involved to understand the Laplacian on these domains with this kind of degeneration. And also there are problems of complex analysis because one has to understand a good parametrization of this domain, this cotangent space, and it's, somehow it's a difficult problem in complex analysis. But the result at the end is that you want to parameterize certain domains in the cotangent bundle. So these are parameterized by at least infinitesimally by functions on the boundary, on the initial boundary. And it turns out that the one which gives the Hitchin components are exactly the pluriharmonic functions on this three-dimensional manifold. That's, so that's the real part of the holomorphic function on this boundary. So, and this can be understood very easily because this model is S1 invariant. So you can decompose into Fourier series. And then for each mod, the holomorphic functions, they come from holomorphic sections on the base, on the sigma. And for the nth mod, you get section of k power n, so that's a holomorphic differential of degree n. So this space comes from here. And actually, 0 and 1 do not give true deformation, so you start from 2. Okay, so this Hitchin component, somehow it exists. At least locally near this model metric. So now I will very quickly, before going to the second topic of approximation by SLN. So how do we see the Betti perspective? So that's the point of view of representations. So I have nothing very precise to say on this. So for an inch-in picture, the Hamiltonian, the SL infinity is the Hamiltonian diffeomorphism of the cotangent bond all of S1. And it's easy to see in the hyperbolic case the action of the, if you have a hyperbolic metric, you have an action of the space of geodesics of the hyperbolic plane. And this is the cotangent bundle of S1. And so in general, there is something happening with this hyperkähler matrix. There is a kind of weak rotation. So you look, you make one coordinate imaginary, and you get something different. You get what's called hypersymplectic metric. So that's hypersymplectic, it's almost the same as hyperkähler, but there are some signs are changed. So it's something like that. And then, well, the square of omega 1 plus omega 2 is 0. So this has, so we are in dimension 4. We have a closed 2 form whose square is 0, so there is a null distribution, which is a foliation. And this foliation is tangent to well, the flow of omega 2 on the boundary, so the flow that's generated by the kernel of omega 2. So the idea is that so this foliation should have some monodromy which gives the representation to cotangent to SL infinity. But well, at the moment I am not able to prove that this metric exists. I can produce it just by analytic continuation near the boundary, but this is not sufficient. You have to get this metric globally. So that's a more difficult problem. But the Betti picture should be that, well, you have some space of flows on this three-dimensional manifold. And, well, the monodromy acts, well, on the space of geodesics, of whatever. And this should be the Betti picture. Okay, okay, let's pass to this approximation SUN to SU infinity. So it's a well-known process that you can, in a precise way, approximate SU infinity by SUN. So this is a Berezin quantization. So you start on CP1, so the section of ON, that's Cn plus 1, so that's just the polynomials of degree n and C. And if you take a real function of CP1, you can define an operator on the space of polynomials of degree n. You multiply a polynomial by a function f, so that's no more holomorphic, but you can project on the holomorphic polynomials. So this gives an operator on En. It turns out if you start from a real function, this operator is self-adjoint. Okay, so, and the point is that this gives an approximation. Because if you look at the bracket of two such operators, Tfn and Tgn, the leading order term is given by the operator associated to the Poisson bracket. Okay, so it means that asymptotically, well, if you renormalize so that to avoid the 1 over n, so you you take n TFN, well, n TFN, this formula tells you that asymptotically, it is a Lie algebra morphism. Asymptotically, the bracket is given by the operator associated to the Poisson bracket. So asymptotically, we have a Lie algebra morphism going from functions on S2 to SU n plus 1. Okay, that's, these operators are called the Toeplitz operators. So that's really a classical object in analysis. Okay, so I want to use this tool to approximate SL infinite representations by SLN representations. Well, more precisely, SL infinite solutions of the Hitchins equation by SLN solutions of the Hitchins equations. So I start again from this S2 bundle over sigma, so that's M. And, well, I see M here, well, as a compactification of the cotangent space. Which is better actually to see in this way as a projectivization of k 1/2 plus k minus 1/2. And so this is this M here I can see in this way as a complex manifold. And this has a holomorphic line bundle which is isomorphic to O1 on each fiber over each CP1, and so this gives still some choice, and I can fix this choice so that on the 0 section I have k power minus 1/2 and at infinity k power 1/2. And then if I take the direct image, so that means that at each point of the surface I take the holomorphic sections of the bundle, then what do I have? I just have well, on each Ln on each fibers are just On. So I get this Cn plus 1, this space of polynomials, but they are twisted in some way by the canonical bundle on the surface, and I get exactly this sum. So I have this bundle, and the idea is that if I do this quantization procedure in each fiber, so if I start from a solution of the self-duality equation for SL infinity, I will get an approximation of the self-duality equations on this bundle. Okay, let's do this. I start from a X bundle with this hyperkähler metric. So it's, again, I have the Kähler form and the holomorphic symplectic form. So what do I need? The tools are a connection on the L, that's this bundle on M, with curvature omega 1. So from such connection, I can define the connection on En in the following way. So I have the M sigma. So this is S2 bundle. So if I have a vector field X here on sigma, then I can lift it has a vector field x tilde on M, which is horizontal, so which is orthogonal to the fibers for the symplectic form. Okay, somehow it's a way to say that I have a symplectic connection of this bundle. And so I can lift vectors to horizontal vectors. So then I can define the connection on this bundle En I've just defined. In the following way, I have a section S. So S is a section of the bundle Ln above. I have a vector field X, I lift it, I take the derivative in this direction of S. So this is no more holomorphic in each fiber, but then I project on holomorphic sections. So it's a very natural process here. And for the X field, I just apply this quantization, so I take the operator associated to these functions, A2 and A3. So this gives me an operator in En with values in K. And the claim is that this geometric procedure produces an asymptotic solution of Hitchin's equations. So this is so how can one prove this? Well, in this theory there are lots of developments which are known. So one can calculate the derivative of the Toeplitz operator associated to F with respect to the connection I defined. And this is given by a development, and the first term is just the derivative of the function. So taking the derivative of function on M somehow is approximated by taking the derivative of the corresponding operator along by this connection which I defined. And also the curvature of the connection is approximated by the operator associated to the curvature above. And so with these two facts, one can calculate everything. You can calculate the equation of the X field, so that's saying that the X field is holomorphic. So you want to calculate, for example, nabla dz bar phi. The higher order is given by the derivative of phi, the function A2 plus I A3, in the direction of the horizontal lifting of dz bar. And now if you look at the horizontal lifting of dz bar, well, this is related to this symplectic form omega 1. It's explicit, it's dz bar minus the Hamiltonian vector field associated to A0 plus IA1, so that's the vertical component. And if you write down dz bar tilde phi, so this gives exactly dz bar phi plus 1/2 of the Poisson bracket of A0 plus IA1 with phi, which is exactly one of the equations I wrote when I wrote the Hitchin system. So the first term here is exactly the equation for the Hitchin system for SL infinity. And the first term for the curvature equation is also given exactly by the curvature term of the SL infinite R Hitchin system. Okay, so this is the way in which I can say That's an asymptotic solution. It means that if I take the two equations, they have a development. And in this development, the first term vanishes exactly when the Hitchin's equations for the SL infinite R system are satisfied. Okay, so one question is, so we have this approximation procedure, and but we just want just an approximation. We want to produce a solution of the equation. So we want to produce representations into SL and R. So we want to deform this approximation to an exact solution of the equations. And so first, there is a theorem that one can find a formal expansion which does that. So that's not exactly an exact solution, because the formal expansion might not converge. But, well, it's the first hint that this should be true. Okay, so let's, how do we prove that? Well, in this theory of geometric quantization, it turns out that this map, which takes a function to an operator, has an approximate inverse, which is called the Berzin symbol, which can be defined like this. Actually, it's the adjoint of the Toeplitz map from functions to operators. So there is an adjoint which is an approximate inverse, which means that if I take a function f, I apply t to get an operator, and then I come back with sigma n, the symbol, I have an asymptotic development, but the first term is f. So this says somehow that you are in SU infinity, taking the Toeplitz Tf, it's a way to project to SU n. And this symbol, you come back to SU infinity. And asymptotically, it's identity. It's an approximate inverse. Okay, so one can use that so these are the two equations we want to solve. Nabla 0, 1, phi, so that the X field being holomorphic, and that's the curvature. You can apply the symbol. And the equation to be solved is the same as seeing as the symbol, sigma applied to the equation is 0. And because symbol is an asymptotic inverse of Toeplitz, there is an asymptotic expansion for this. So now we go from functions, B, that's the functions, A1, A0, A1, A2, A3, to functions. Because through the symbols, we came back to functions. And so there is an asymptotic expansion in which the first term, again, well, that's normal, it's exactly the hypercolor equation. So omega 1 wedge omega c, that must be 0, and omega 1 square minus 1/2 omega c bar, that's exactly the hypercolor equations. So now the problem is settled in the way that you can linearize with respect to B at infinity. And it turns out that the linearization is invertible. And this means that you can apply the process with somehow the implicit function theorem in a formal way to produce the formal expansion. Okay, so this is a formal approximation. So, of course, one would like to obtain an actual approximation by true solutions. But I cannot say yet that I'm able to do that, but I hope to be able to do that. So what should be the result? We have the Hitchin component for SL infinity, and the Hitchin component not for SUN, but for SLN. And this approximation should provide a map going from H infinity to Hn. And so each has its own Hitchin map. So maybe I should rewrite the Hitchin map for François. No. So each has this Hitchin map. So this goes to differentials of degree at least n, and this is all differentials. And this will come with the convergence of the Hitchin maps. So in the following sense, so it turns out that there are asymptotic developments. If you take the trace of phi power k, no, what? Sorry, there is an asymptotic development of this kind. If you take k power of Tfn, well, the first term in the development is, yes, it's a trace of T f power kn. Okay, so it's not only that you have the Poisson bracket which behaves well, but also the multiplication of functions. And then, so you can estimate the trace of phi n power k, which is, well, this is the Hitchin map. This is the differential here. You can make an asymptotic expansion. So this gives something with the leading order term, which is the operator associated to phi power k. But from this equality, which is always true, which is easy, so this is exactly the integral of phi power k on this bundle, on the fiber. And this is the way I defined the Hitchin map at the beginning. So the Hitchin maps here of the approximation should converge up to some power of n to the Hitchin map of the limit. Okay, so from this one should, well, the first corollary should be the injectivity of the Hitchin map. So remember, I have this SL infinity R component. I have only locally that it's isomorphic to the space of all holomorphic differentials. So I would like to prove that it's a global parameterization. So I need to prove this map to be injective and surjective. So this would give injectivity. So that would be the first consequence, and then it would be interesting to study, of course, the properties of this limiting process. So you start from one of these limiting objects. You get a sequence of points in the SLN are spaces which converge. So this corresponds to representation. So what are the properties, what are the asymptotic properties that this sequence have? So one can try to, once this is proved, one can try to begin to understand the limit geometric properties of sequence of representation in the SLN representation spaces when n goes to infinity. Okay, I stop here. Thank you. The scissor action, no. No. No.
So you have this itching map. Oh, sorry.
It's okay, it's okay.
You have this itching map. Does it? So that's either in some hole that for some guys you localize in the boundary of the disk.
The itching map?
Yeah, so the image is performed as this integration of a disk.
Yeah.
So could you hope that actually you could express a formula that if
No, it must depend only on the boundary. The data on the boundary determines the whole thing. Okay, but it determines it in a very indirect way because you have to solve the equations. So in principle, it depends only on the data on the boundary, but one cannot write formulas.
What kind of compactness properties do you have?
Sorry?
What kind of compactness properties do you have for
Compactness for
the folder type code?
yes, yes, I do because if I hope to prove surjectivity, I certainly need that. But no, there is nothing obvious here. It's not clear that if you take just this holomorphic differential, which are just, integration of the moments, the WK, over the fibers, why should that control the whole solutions? So probably it's true because, the system is very rigid. You don't have any domain like this. It's only very special domains. So it should be true, but I don't know why.
Do you expect the spectral curves of the approximating guys to approximate in some way the domain?
Well, no, that's a good question. No, I have no idea, but while saying that the Hitchin polynomial converge, the Hitchin polynomials they exactly give the spectral curve. So this should translate in some statement on the spectral curve. No, I've not thought about that.
or do you have a hyperkinetic formula?
On the space of all, no, first it's a Hitchin component, so it cannot be a hyperparametric, it can be only a calorimetric. No.
We'll have to say further questions for later. Thank you again.